Compared to the 2022 election, the current one is easier in a certain sense, yet more difficult in another. I will explain both, if I may. In 2022, the Americans were right there on our chests. So, it wasn't just Brussels but the Americans too. It was the Biden administration, if you remember. Thus, not only the Brussels liberals but also the American liberals were interested in a change of government in Hungary. They sent money, or rolled in the dollars, providing resources and support exactly as required, and they lost. Since then, a change has occurred in America. We don't have enemies there anymore, but friends. However, the resources are still flowing from Brussels. From this perspective, the Americans are no longer our opponents, so the election seems easier. At the same time, Brussels has taken a very sharp turn. There is a strategic shift regarding how Brussels views itself, what the European Union thinks of itself, and what it wants to achieve. The stakes have increased since 2022, and they want to win on the stakes they have placed on the table. They see an obstacle to their victory, and that obstacle is us. I bet you can guess. It's Hungary. Let's look closer. The weight of Brussels' plans has grown, the stakes of their concepts have increased, and Hungary is in the way, I won't say of everything, but of many things they desire. From this perspective, the election will be harder because Brussels will mobilize far more energy against us than they did in 2022. Now, make of that what you will. Where does that leave us? It means the match is wide open. That is what I want to say. So, if anyone thinks this is a foregone conclusion, do not let them deceive you. This battle is an open one. As the protagonist says in the Rambo or Rocky films, it's only over at the very end. And indeed, until then, nothing is decided.
I have a fresh, hot off-the-press report in my hands right now. A report from the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives in Washington. It came out yesterday and details the pressure the European Union has placed on various American social media providers, how it influences political opinion, which views must be dialed down, and which opinions are undesirable. It includes a small map and runs over hundreds of pages, explaining how Brussels and the European Union have influenced European elections in recent years. What is your opinion on this? And can this report be expanded to include the Hungarian elections as well?
I believe it can already. If I look at the media supporting the opposition, I can show exactly who receives hundreds of millions of forints from Brussels. I don't want to drop names here, Telex and the like, but for example, there is such a thing as a journalism academy. Lo and behold, the journalists from these outlets teach there and receive their pay as educational wages. It's a bit convoluted but not overly complicated. So, they send it regularly from there. We see it, and the Sovereignty Protection Office uncovers these instances, documents them, and periodically publishes them. We joke about this now, but it isn't child's play, because it is ultimately about a foreign power wanting to decide the election results in Hungary. One could call this a Fidesz conspiracy theory or a figment of the imagination. Still, a report from the US House of Representatives recording these facts should perhaps be taken seriously. Furthermore, we also have the trouble of Kiev joining the campaign, sending funds from that direction too. Let's have no illusions. This is documented. They don't necessarily send cash, but for instance, high-value IT services are sent from Ukraine to our opponent, the Tisza Party, who, of course, didn't pay for it. Or rather, it wasn't them who paid. I don't want to unravel every complicated thread here, but these are known mechanisms. So, we must prepare for the fact that the question isn't whether we'll have the opposition for breakfast. This is an important thing. The opponent's voter base consists of people and communities for whom it doesn't matter if the future Hungarian government is fed from the palm of another foreign power. It matters to us. It doesn't matter to them. My point is that since we all know the layout of the pitch, this won't be the deciding factor in the election. The European Commission is constantly censoring the public spheres of member states. We might not agree on this, but I'll give you a glaring case. There is currently a Russian-Ukrainian war. The Union, or rather the Commission, decided that no Russian news sources should be allowed into European Union territory. So today, when you watch television, listen to the radio, or browse the internet, the situation is that the Union allows arguments, reports, and analyses supporting the Ukrainians, but there is a regulation, a public regulation, that forbids member states from letting us hear Russian arguments that dispute the Ukrainian view. It's not about who is right or about strengthening the Ukrainian case. It's about ensuring you cannot even hear the other side. Showing it is forbidden. This is where we stand today when we think about Brussels and censorship. We swallowed this. There was essentially no protest against it. We accepted that this is just the way it is. But if you think about it, in a normal situation, this shouldn't be possible. If a war is happening outside Hungary's borders, I believe Hungarians have the right to know both viewpoints, not just one. But today, that is not possible. Brussels censors it. This is everyday reality. So, if you look at the global economic figures, the contribution to the world's gross national product, the contribution to the international gross domestic product, Asia, China, the United States, Europe, you can see that Europe is coming down. The Americans are struggling and holding their ground, while the Asians are on the rise. But if you look at the number of patents, the number of inventions, the new technologies, the American president says every day, as is expected of an American president, that while there are all sorts of opinions, we are the greatest, the strongest, and so on. Yet even as we listen to this, we feel there is some truth in it, perhaps in one or two areas, but it is obvious that it is no longer the case in every field. Just as we must protect the European market, or they want to protect it, against high-tech goods coming from Asia. We are not talking about keeping out Chinese trainers so that European shoemakers don't go bust. We aren't talking about that. We are talking about the machinery industry, the space industry, IT, telecommunications. We are talking about the most modern industries, where the West is now only in a defensive position. Therefore, the question for all of us, for me and for you, is, right, so what now? And furthermore, we are in the European Union. And one should not pin any hope on the European Union for the coming period. It is better to settle that score now. It is not easy, I know, emotionally. It is a grand idea. We all know it was one of the greatest, most magnificent ideas that, instead of war, European countries should cooperate. Brilliant. But what has come of the whole thing is what we are discussing here today. That there is censorship, that they want to push us into a war, that they want to take our money to Ukraine, that they want to interfere in how we raise our children, and they want to tell us who we should live with and force us to let the migrants in. They are saying dreadful things from over there. So, clearly, what is there is no longer attractive to us. There are a few points in this peace council that even I could criticize. It is not developed enough. But the truth is that the UN is paralyzed. The truth is that international institutions cannot resolve armed conflicts. Neither the UN nor the Security Council. Nothing. Not the European Union either. So, we either watch these paralyzed international institutions and lament, or we say, look, everyone, let's pack this in. It's not working. Let's try it some other way. The American president says he is up for the task. There are few things he wouldn't take on, especially if it leads towards world fame, because, as I say, it's fantastic. It's grander than anything before. After all, even his plane is so big it won't fit on the continent, or perhaps it wouldn't even be able to land in Hungary. Because that's what America is like. I understand that for a person of European culture, this doesn't look like a negotiated solution. It lacks the search for consensus. It lacks many things. But the fact remains that international institutions have gone to ruin. They are paralyzed, they consume a lot of money, they are bureaucratic, and they don't solve problems. So, let's try something else. That is why I also thought, and asked the government for authorization, to let us join this, to give it a go. What is certain is that nothing more will come of the old way. This reaches as far as Greenland, of course, but that is such a far-off thing that would be talking about great chunks of ice. I won't venture into that now, as it is another very difficult question. There are quite a few aspects to how a conflict should be settled when the great American lion comes knocking on the door of the small Danish state's territory, which, by the way, is massive in size but inhabited by only 57,000 people. Just so we can set aside any mental image we might have of Greenland as a typical country. It is a country in the sense that 57,000 people live there. And both states are NATO members. In that case, I believe Hungary must also be cautious and say it is a bilateral conflict. There is an institution to which both belong, NATO. If we wish, let us discuss this matter internationally. Let us discuss it within NATO. That is where there is the best chance of settling it. Then we shall see. So, all I want to say is that we don't need to throw out every institution, as there may be some, such as NATO, that are suitable for handling such conflicts. But that same institution was not suitable, shall we say, for preventing the Russian-Ukrainian war. Something else must be done there. So, I rather wanted to liberate your thinking, or break down the barriers in your minds. That we do not have to cling to the traditional conception of international law, because it has failed. We do not have to cling to traditional international institutions. And we should be glad that there are finally people in international politics, larger than us, moreover, who are shaking the proverbial tree and trying to reorganize international relations.
And since we were talking about the American president, the possibility of Donald Trump visiting Hungary has been on the agenda for some time now. Do we know anything about this?
I'm enticing him.
How?
I've given him some dates. For instance, I'm not sure if this is the most appropriate form of courtship, but in any case, there is a conversation going on between us about it. You see, there's also a firm agreement that I made with both the American president and the Russian president, which is that if there is progress and a peace summit takes place, it will be held in Budapest. Both have confirmed their intention regarding this, so I believe it will happen sooner or later. If there is peace, there will be a peace summit too. Over the last 4 years, European people have been taught that war is good. That the Russians can be beaten, they can be defeated, they can be forced into a good settlement. That it won't cost us a single penny. We'll defeat them. They'll pay a good price, and we'll be in the money. This is the fairy tale being sold in Western Europe. And if you can imagine it, there are people living there who actually believe it. That is the situation. And we ought to find a way out of this somehow. It wasn't my intention to describe all this just for the sake of it. I simply wanted to give you a sense that the situation we are in is extremely dangerous and extremely risky. We must keep our wits about us and not swallow the fairy tale that if we fall into line with Brussels, we'll come out on top. The truth is exactly the opposite. We must remain on a national path, even in foreign policy. It is no accident that they are constantly preoccupied with stripping member states of their right of veto. I'll start with this, which, by the way, isn't even a right of veto. And if it's a different world, a different logic, that too has its own rationale, but it is different from the mindset of civilian politicians standing on the ground of peace. Therefore, I believe we must do everything in our power to ensure a situation does not arise where a Russian-Ukrainian Slavic fratricidal war, because that is where we stand at this moment, becomes first a regional, then a European, and perhaps eventually a world war. This prospect has not been closed off. This prospect remains open. I am not saying we will reach that point, but the danger is inherent in it. The danger of a regional, European war is certainly there. Even if this isn't tomorrow morning's problem, it is the problem for the day after. Because tomorrow's problem is not that the war is coming here, but that things are being taken from us to go there. For instance, young people as soldiers, and our money being sent to the front line. I don't want to frighten anyone. I only want to give you a sense that the rope on which European politics is dancing today is not just problematic because it is thin, being a rope, but because it isn't even taut. One could fall off it or slip at any moment. That is why we must be sensible. So, on the question of when there will be peace, there will be a peace, a Russian-Ukrainian ceasefire, perhaps even a peace treaty. But to ensure that, considering we are talking about a 1,200-kilometer front where a border incident could happen at any point at any time, a new war does not break out following a border incident, and that we don't slide into a consecutive series of wars, but rather that a peace can truly close the war, it is necessary that European soldiers are not stationed on Ukrainian territory without Russian approval. If they do not respect this rule, it will lead to a war that will approach Hungary's borders as well, and it will result in war after war over the coming decades. So, my challenges are in Brussels. I have no challenges in Hungary. They sent someone here. That's a different matter. Thus, while Hungary will be saved from great trouble if we win the election, the real battle doesn't have to be fought here but afterwards in Brussels to ensure they cannot push us into the war. I must say that the domestic election is the prerequisite for being able to win the battles in Brussels. Our opponents are truly there. That is the difficult part. And we could call them Ursula von der Leyen or Manfred Weber, or we could even bring up the German Chancellor. How interesting that only German names come up. Who on earth understands this European history? But that's just the way it is.